Welcome to Valentina's audio stories. You are listening to the fantasy story, The Tales of Auberee, A Prince Visits the Inn. I was Auberee, a beautiful young foxwoman. Meaning, I was a young woman, but I had a fox tail, and how proud I was of my fox tail. I lived in the enchanted woods, in an old inn, with my special grandmother. My grandmother was a wise woman, who was always old, but never aged. She was indeed sweet and kind, and had found me as a newborn babe in the middle of the forest. You see, fox people, like me, are born from magical flowers deep in the forest, and we are adopted by either humans or other creatures from the forest once we are born. In my case, I was adopted by Nan. My beautiful Nan, full of wisdom and magic powers. In the middle of the forest, my Nan and I had a small cozy inn that often had visitors needing rest or meals. Most of our visitors were just as enchanted as we were. Sometimes they were families of talking mushrooms, talking bears, or even ogres. Other times, it was tired human travelers. Nan and I lived a simple life, but always full of adventure. I was happy with my life. However, once, I tell you this story, of a visitor on the coldest day of winter. It was a human man. He was very well dressed and rode a very barded horse, with standards and banners, and several young men that were his assistants carried his things and clearly helped him with everything. When he knocked at the door of our inn, he introduced himself as Prince Elliot, a prince of a faraway land. His assistants did not come inside the inn. I heard the prince tell his assistants they were not to bother him while he ate inside. I let the prince go inside. I instead stayed out to talk to the assistants. Is it not too cold to stay outside? There are plenty of tables in the tavern, I said to the assistants. The eldest of the assistants looked at me frightened. We must not disturb the prince. I thought that was indeed a strange thing. I really did not want them to stay out in the cold, so I said to them, then at least come in from the back, through the vegetable garden. There is a door that leads to the kitchen. You can come eat in the kitchen, and the prince won't know a thing. The assistants looked at me wide-eyed, but this time with shock in their eyes as if they had never received such kindness. With round red noses and hair all cut the same, they all looked alike, and scurried off to the back of the inn without further need to convince them. I then went in and found the prince, who looked a bit irritated to have been left waiting. I asked him what he wished for, whether a room, food, or both, and he asked for food. Once he was sitting at a table, I brought him what we had that day, which was carrot soup and thick slices of crunchy bread, just made that morning. I was very proud when I set the plate in front of him. At once, he asked me what food this was, and I told him it was carrot soup. I thought it was rather obvious from the orange color and the sweet smell, but he looked at it as if it were an unknown substance. I smiled at him and encouraged him to try it. The prince tasted a spoonful of it, frowned, and then his face outright contorted and he nearly spat it out. "This is something a lowly farmer would eat," he cried. I felt horrified to hear such lack of thankfulness. Farmers were some of the most important people in our woods. They brought us food to enjoy every day. Everyone's lives depended on their hard work. Who do you have to thank when you have food in your mouth? I asked. The prince looked at me, confused. Who brings you the grains for the bread you eat, the milk for you to drink, and the cheese for you to have strong bones? I asked again. The prince frowned, his face dark. I do not like this carrot soup. You will bring me veal, cut thin, and a proper bottle of wine. I shook my head. I have no such things. Then you are a waste of time. I will not waste my precious palate on your gross food. Then he took his things and he left. I followed him, curious to see what he would do next. When he was outside, he did not find his assistants, and he huffed, "Where have my useless assistants gone?" It was beginning to snow heavily. The clouds in the sky were dark and menacing. I could tell we would have a blizzard in a matter of moments. I said to the prince, "It seems to me there is a storm coming. I recommend you stay until the storm passes. What storm? He opened his palm to the snowflakes. This is just a few snowflakes, nothing more. Certainly not enough to keep me here to suffer your pathetic food. I am going to go look for a better tavern, one where they know how to serve me what I want. Tell my assistants, whenever they return, that I have gone ahead to the nearest town. Then he jumped on his horse and he galloped off. The nearest town was over an hour away. I worried the prince would find himself in the snowstorm, alone, and not knowing his surroundings. It could become dangerous. I called out to the prince to please rethink his plan, for his own sake. He ignored me completely and rode away, out of view. Shortly after the prince disappeared out of view into the forest, the snowstorm became intense. His assistants, unable to go after the prince due to the weather, stayed with us, and enjoyed the carrot soup and warm ginger tea while the storm intensified. Nan and I told them stories about our most interesting visitors and they promised to come back to visit us someday. After a couple of hours, the bad weather ended and a nice sunny day returned. At that point, the assistants left and headed after their prince. I wished them good luck and hoped the prince had not encountered any serious trouble while on his way to the town. It had truly been unwise to travel during such a storm. 3 days later. I had just opened the inn for the morning when I saw an unkempt figure approach the inn. It was a man hunchbacked from the exhaustion, wearing a cloak that looked so drenched it resembled a mop, his hair a mess, and his face pale and frightened. I realized then, it was the prince. He stumbled up the steps of the inn and he abandoned himself on the porch, crying for help. I ran out to him. "Prince, what happened?" "3 days lost in the woods," he muttered. "Because of the storm?" I asked. He nodded, and he gasped, "I am frozen and I am starving." I helped him up and showed him to a room, where he could change into some spare dry clothes I kept for occasions just as this, and then I brought him a plate of warm food. It happened to be carrot soup again, with my perfect crunchy toast. I thought it was very ironic. "Did my assistants leave during the storm?" he asked. "Your assistants came after you as soon as the storm faded," I said. "Then they are probably home by now. Surely, my father already has troops looking for me. I imagine they will find my horse, since the unfaithful steed threw me off and left me." Though the prince did not compliment my soup, this time I watched as he ate it with appreciation. He took the toast and dipped it in the soup, eating it voraciously. He sighed in relief as he ate. That sigh said everything. I could tell he was happy and feeling relief to have such pleasant warm food available to him. "If you had stayed to eat my carrot soup that day in the first place, you would have never gotten lost," I said. The young man gave me an angry look, but I knew he had learned a lifelong lesson, whether he had wanted it or not, that there is a funny secret about being grateful. Not only does being grateful make you more respectful to others, but your own life becomes much better. The prince, after a long silence, relented and admitted I was right. Then, with a shy smile, he asked me if I could bring him another bowl of carrot soup to eat, and some more of the crunchy toast too. The end. We hope you enjoyed A Prince Visits the Inn. Remember to subscribe to our channel.